Hi, I'm Stuart Reid from the WA Council of Social Service, WACOSS. This webinar is about the WACOSS Co-Design Toolkit. It's a toolkit that was developed to help explain the co-design approach to the design of services in the community sector. Co-design is an approach to the development of these programs, services, policies, strategies, all with an aim to improve the outcomes for the people for whom these services are being designed. It's an approach that involves a partnership between the government, usually, that is funding the programs and services, the community services sector and the organizations within it that are providing those services, and the service users that the programs are being designed to help. So this co-design toolkit is to provide some tools that can be used to assist this process. The toolkit begins with an introduction explaining that it's about designing and delivering community services in partnership, reciprocal partnership between the funders, service providers, and the people using the services, and often the carers, families, and others involved in those services as well. Working together is just a better way to get things done and really meet the needs of the service users. This toolkit isn't going to be everything for everyone. It's an opportunity to check the process, see if you are actually designing a new service or redesigning an existing service in line with best practice co-design principles. So the first of the tools proper is the definitions and principles tool. You can use this tool at any stage of the co-design process. It's worth actually checking back from time to time throughout the process just to make sure that you are still in line with the definitions and the principles. So, what does this tool do? Well, it provides a definition of co-design and other related terms as well, but it also outlines some key principles of co-design. Clarity of purpose, inclusiveness, equality of the partnership, respect and trust. And these are some of the characteristics of any design process that involves people. They're elements that should be involved in all of our business. But there are some other elements that are equally important that emerged from our consultations around co-design. And these were that the process needs to be data-driven, but summarized in a way that the participants can really understand and see the relevance of that data. It needs to be comprehensive, so it needs to be a process that will include all of the relevant people and information they require. It needs to focus also on the evaluation. What are the outcomes and how are these outcomes going to be measured? These are all things that need to be looked into in the process. And it's an ongoing process. It's not just something you do once and then leave behind. It's something that you continue to do. And as an iterative process, people make mistakes. You learn from those mistakes. So we've talked about things like prototyping approaches and learning from those, redesigning, and continuing to engage people in the process. So this is a tool that also outlines some of the different environments in which co-design can take place. At an individual level, say developing a support plan. At a service level, where individual service users might have input into the design of services generally. And then at program level, where multiple services may be involved with one or more funders. And then there's co-design that takes place in a particular location, place-based co-design. And then the sort of whole of community, whole of system level co-design, where what you're trying to do is take a design approach to resolving entrenched problems in a complex system. So, is co-design right for the circumstances? Well, it's not right for all the circumstances. So one of the tools is co-design right for the circumstances? This is a kind of checklist. It asks you some questions about your proposed reform, and then you tick the box. Yes, maybe, no. It's not definitive. There are times when you might tick a few no boxes and you think, well, no, we really do need to take a co-design approach. And there are others where you might tick all the boxes and think, well, actually, there are other approaches that will work. But this is a really useful guide. So that's why it's there. The next tool is making the case. Now, making the case is really important because this is what will get you the mandate for co-design. And without a mandate, you'll find that your co-design process will flounder either at the first hurdle or somewhere down the track. So making the case is really important. There are some key messages here in this tool. The first is that co-design is an endorsed approach, endorsed by the West Australian State Government. It's a preferred tool for the design of new services and for the revision of existing services. So the first thing in making the case for co-design is to emphasize that it is government policy. The other important message in making a case for co-design is that people are the experts in their own lives, and therefore they should have a role in determining the nature of the services. So co-design recognizes the central role that service users have in any design. So making the case for the tool design, for co-design, gives you the sentences, the phrases, the key concepts that you can use when you're putting a case to your senior executive, your minister, your chief executive, about why co-design is the approach to take. People are the experts in their own lives. Organizations, their managers and frontline staff are the experts in working with those clients. Government agencies, well, they need to be at the table because they're the experts at understanding the priorities of the elected government and what it is that they're intending to achieve as outcomes from the funding they're providing. So this tool also talks about the value and benefits of co-design, its intrinsic value, its potential for increased capacity and impact, and the potential for reduced cost. These are important arguments to make when making the case. And then the government preparation tool comes into play. This is one of the most substantive tools in the toolkit. It goes through what you need to know by way of preparation if you're in a government department. Things like having a common understanding of the scope and intent of the process, setting timeframes, reviewing existing practices, getting the commitment, the mandate. As I said, sometimes that involves ministers or CEOs. Certainly it involves people from across the agency in different parts of the agency. So that might be people in procurement, people in contract management, people in service delivery, people in management, people in the executive and in the policy and evaluation areas as well. There's an equivalent tool for the community sector to help them to prepare if they're invited to be part of a co-design process. And it starts really by asking whether or not you want to accept this invitation to be part of the co-design process. So it outlines some pluses and some minuses, some pros and cons, if you like. Some of the benefits, things like professional development for the staff involved in meeting with their peers across the sector and discussing the issues that matter to them, that's pretty important. Being at the table with government when they are talking about what their emerging priorities are or their issues or what it is they're going to be funding in the future, that's of value too. So there are a number of things like that you would add up as benefits, and these are listed and talked about in the tool. But there are also costs as well. There's the actual staff time. I mean, getting people time away from their work at any time is always a difficult call, but in this case, it's sometimes worth it. You have to weigh that up. There are also things like the issue of intellectual property. You're being asked to share your ideas, your thoughts on how the service should be delivered, how it should be designed. These are things that are sometimes unique to a particular organization, and sometimes there's a limit to how much of that you want to share. So you need to look into that from your own perspective and make a call on that. It asks you to assess whether this co-design is genuinely a co-design process or not. And you can go back to the definitions, the principles, the preparation that's been done, and weigh that up for yourself. But if it is not, then you're more likely to be wasting your time at the table. If it's a meaningless consultation, you don't want to be there. If it's something that is truly going to shape the nature of the services, then it's important that you be there. So there are a number of specific things in this tool as well, like informing your board, engaging with your consumer representatives, and negotiating their participation, what you want to bring to the table, and what's non-negotiable, those sorts of things. Then we move on to the stakeholder engagement tool. Stakeholder engagement is a critical component of co-design. One of the points that it makes is that no one person is representative of all of the people in that category. So having an Aboriginal person does not represent Aboriginal people. Having a person with a disability does not represent all people with disabilities. So it talks about the idea of intersectionality, which is an important concept in this context, because it talks about the need for a range of people and as comprehensive a range of people at the table as possible, and possibly different strategies for engaging different people as well. We then have a general introductory co-design process tool, which outlines the overall process. This tool provides an indication of what is inclusive, comprehensive, and effective in leading to better service and programs. There's no single model, but the tool explains the preparation required, the initial engagement, the contacting of stakeholders, and then goes into the co-design process. Is it right for purpose? There are tools further on in the toolkit that go into these issues in more detail. It talks about the importance of providing feedback to participants throughout the process. You need to let people know that they've been heard. You need to explain to them what has changed as a result of what's been heard. How's the model shaping up through the process? That way you get increased buy-in, people keep coming back to stay involved in the process if they feel they've been heard. We follow that up with a co-design process tool in more detail, which unpacks some of those issues further. It really allows you to match the co-design process to the scale and purpose of the program or service design you're involved with. Again, it talks about the preparation that has to be undertaken, the distribution of documents, the background, the data, clear statements around purpose, and typically there'll be some kind of initial workshop. So it talks also about that workshop and some of the things that have to be in that workshop to make it effective. So things like it establishes what the process will be and makes clear the aim of the process. It talks about how the people will be involved. It talks about the service environment. It talks about key aspects of the proposed program. It talks about what's negotiable, what's not negotiable. And the toolkit goes through some of the topics that you'd want to tick off as topics for conversation and agreement in the co-design process. Things like what the high-level outcomes are. So it's absolutely critical that the workshop is not just a talk fest. It is about getting progress in the design. But to do that, everybody has to reach a common understanding about what it is they're there for, what the outcomes they're hoping to achieve are, and how they're going to go about getting there. That brings us on to the tips for workshops. And this is my favorite tool, really. It's one that gives you a whole heap of very simple and really quite incisive ideas about what makes a good workshop work well. It includes things like the importance of considering the cultural context, being grounded in the reality of the service land, of the experience of service users, and of ways of presenting information that are not all about having somebody stand in front of a PowerPoint. So options like having people on a panel and an interviewer interview them as an alternative to someone from the department telling the story. So any presentation components, by the way, should be kept as brief and to the point as possible. This is an engagement process, not an information presentation process. So then, when you've gone through your workshop stages, your engagement stages, you might have used multiple techniques on the engagement, not just workshops, it's important to evaluate the process that you've undertaken. So, assuming that you've gone through the co-design process, we've got a process evaluation tool that you can use. It's really pretty self-evident how to use it, and it just asks fairly obvious questions. But you'll find if you get plenty of responses to that, you'll get an indication of what you need to do differently next time, and also some really useful information about reporting the process that you've undertaken. So that brings us to specific tools that are required for the co-design of programs and services in different contexts. So the first one is program and service level engagement. And this really is the context in which the toolkit is most useful. And it talks about the need for people to be engaged in this process, about talking to, for example, external stakeholders, maybe other government departments, officials from even the Commonwealth or other state agencies that have an interest in this area. Also engaging with the service providers, both private and in the not-for-profit sector. Important to cover all the bases in that space. But also it mentions other stakeholders, like private consultants with expertise in this area, and also academics and researchers who work in the area as well. But the critical people, the most important people to have in the room at any time, are the people for whom the programs and services are being designed. People are the experts in their own lives, and there are many ways that this can be done. This tool also has a section on engaging through Aboriginal organisations, community-controlled organisations, a particularly important strategy, especially with the current policies of state and federal government, with a certain amount of requirement around engagement with Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. But it's also an excellent way to engage with the Aboriginal service users, and having Aboriginal community-controlled organisations at the table is a critical factor in success of co-design. And then there's the place-based tool. This tool talks about the kinds of networks that are required to tap into to develop an approach that is genuinely place-based. This is used when you're trying to deal with an entrenched problem at a local level and have the data, the research, the information around all of the elements of this issue, this problem, this policy matter that you are trying to address. We've got a case study included in here that's outlined here as well. There's also an extraordinary little list which we've got from the people who participated in the case study, who were very much involved in the place-based co-design that we're talking about, and they give us their helpful hints on what is successful in place-based co-design. Then there's engagement in system or strategic level co-design. This is your large-scale stuff, which is only covered briefly in this tool. However, it does have a link to a very useful resource, which is Working Together, Involving Community and Stakeholders. It's a WA state government publication for some years ago, but it's extraordinary how useful it still is, and there are links to that document in the tool. Finally, there's a brief introduction to engagement in the delivery of services. This is the engagement with individual service users once the service is up and running. It's often called co-production, and it could do with a whole toolkit all of its own, but some key elements of co-production are outlined in the tool. So, that's the WACOSS Co-Design Toolkit. It was developed with a grant from the West Australian Department of Finance from their community capacity building grants for peak organisations. WACOSS, the WA Council of Social Service, is the peak body for community services in WA, and we developed this toolkit in partnership with community organisations and with consumers and consumer representatives and with government. It's a toolkit that we hope will achieve better outcomes for the future service delivery in Western Australia. We hope that you find it useful. So please let us know your experience of using the toolkit. You can contact us at info@wacos.org.au, and we'd be really keen to enter into dialogue with you around what we could do to improve the toolkit. So thank you very much.